Hey class, welcome to the conclusion of Mission Impossible, learn enough about the world religions in one semester to be a more effective global citizen. How did it go for you? Do you remember the confusion of learning about Dharma, Kama, and Karma? I bet that many of you can and will remember the meanings of these terms, and that you'll continue to hear references to everything from nirvana to sacred land struggles in the coming years. I think this basic foundation in cultural knowledge will carry you forward with two edges. First, greater knowledge with which to take in new information about religious lives. Think about every newscast. And two, you'll actually hear more and see more references to the world religions than ever before, because now you have the basic vocabulary and analytical frameworks for actually seeing the stuff that is already out there. Our authors defined religion as, quote, a system of meaning embodied in a pattern of life, a community of faith, and a worldview that articulates a view of the sacred and of what ultimately matters. So we can look across the religious traditions and see these three elements as common to religious traditions, that they provide a pattern of life, a community of faith, and worldview or cosmology that describes what matters most, what is sacred to that community. Now, with no simple or definitive definition of the sacred, no scale that we can carry to each culture and say, throw your sacred stuff on here so we can evaluate how much sacred it's got on it, we are left instead with the tools of the university, which means we study how communities represent to themselves and to others what matters most to them. As our authors put it, what makes life worth living. In the comparative study of religion, we do not have a truthometer, a godometer, a spiritometer, or any other empirical device upon which we could substantiate claims of religious truth, or argue whether there is or isn't a religious truth. This is great because to me it's much more fun to learn about the three areas of different cultures than it is to stand in judgment about who or what is right. So our book gave you your first two steps for the analysis of religion. Define the basic terms that you're going to use, like if you're going to use the word religion, you need to define it in an adequate academic frame. And then second, then pursue the data to fill in the elements of that frame, to provide those heuristic tools like the three areas. Then you can start to add the data in, and then you begin to develop this matrix with which you can compare and learn more. You'll actually learn more every time something new information pops up. It kind of changes. Oh, wow, I wonder if that's an issue of personhood that would impact how I've been thinking about this. So these frames, you've got the first two frames that allow you to move out into the world thinking comparatively. What our book doesn't do is engage us in the consistent analysis of the power of religious lives. What does it mean that the embodiment of religious meanings is so powerful as to generate the determination among religious communities to act in the greatest examples of charity, compassion, and self-sacrifice, but also to act in the greatest examples of violence, bloodshed, and devaluation of other people as excommunicated from the field of the divine will? Some of you will read the great philosophers of power, Foucault, Gramsci, McLuhan, Derrida, and in religious studies, Catherine Keller, who I'm not related to. I wish I was. I worked with her recently at a conference, but she is a great analyst of power with regard to religious lives. And you can apply their theories of how do we discuss power, how do we analyze power. You can apply their theories to the material of religious studies in order to think more deeply about religion and power. Some of you may continue on in religious studies classes where you develop analytical frames that integrate an analysis of power into the study more deeply than this book could. I mean, again, it was Mission Impossible. How much can they do in one book? Luckily, our conclusion with indigenous religions opens the door to the analysis of the power of religious lives for us. So we actually get a taste of it here in this last 2 weeks. And let me pursue that. So in response to Catherine Callahan in the week 14 discussion thread, I tried to describe the physicality of the sacred. Because if you look at the physicality of religion, you can begin to analyze the way power works in religious traditions. Now, most people tend to start by studying religions as though we are comparing beliefs, kind of airy-fairy stuff maybe floating in the air, like images of a Holy Spirit, maybe gray beards and angels in the background. And like, okay, we'll just compare the fluffy stuff across these traditions. Or for somebody who that stuff is deeply important to them, they might be troubled by the idea that they would look at stuff that's deeply important to somebody else as well. So there's this odd space in the study of religion. Now, if you think of religion as beliefs, and that's not what our book, right? It didn't set us up, let's compare beliefs across these traditions. It started with embodied meanings. It won't get you very far in understanding the power of religious lives if you keep thinking to yourself, oh, what do they believe? Oh, what do they believe? And thinking that it's beliefs that are giving you a handle on how religions work. You've got to poke a hole in the bubble of belief that we tend to assume is the mark of a religious person, and let those beliefs run down into the bones and blood of people who train daily in the work of connecting with power that they experience as the ultimate power of their lives. So, right, can we inject this into physicality, and can we inject it into the physical locations of those religious lives? In the discussion, I was looking specifically at the physicality of the sacred. By physicality, I want you to think both of human bodies that are inspired to make their places holy. Their physical bodies are trained with embodied meanings, right? Prayer, on your knees, submission, connection, focus, intensity. These are all attributes that dancers and soldiers and all kinds of people who need to concentrate their energy would recognize. They train their bodies and so that those bodies are ready either to do the work of including the marginalized in the world or excluding those that they take to be heathen, pagan, or otherwise not on the map of what God likes, right? And so this training has to do with very basic orientation in the world regarding good and evil, and whether your work is to reach out or whether part of your work is to stop that which is not holy. Now, this is where I think it helps to take the word sacred out of the sky, so to speak, and think of it as meaning, I feel power. From an indigenous religions perspective, we hear often that the religious tradition is in many ways an analysis of how the land holds power. And here's, like, have a look here at this. It's an analysis of how one would access literally a cosmic power and connect to that power through the work of laying out that medicine wheel, right? This is an engineering project that is meant to bring you into connection with a divine power that is very pragmatic. We're talking about, where did the sun come up? And how is my relationship to knowing where that sun comes up making me stronger? All right, so from an indigenous religions perspective, we hear often that the religious tradition is in many ways an analysis of how the land holds power and how the land offers gifts that increase human power, from the gifts of air, water, and food to gifts such as dreams or the capacity to harness protective power after receiving the gift of tears on a mountain like Heart Mountain. And I do hope you guys will watch through that video. That's a piece of Wyoming sacred lands issues that ought to be central to how we're studying religion at University of Wyoming. The gift of tears that I describe in there Wash the eyes so that a human can see where power is concentrated on the land. Now, this is very pragmatic stuff, as pragmatic as laying out a medicine wheel. And it is more closely related to a petroleum engineer in our culture than a magician. The petroleum engineer is probing the earth using their theories, using their data they're probing the earth for a real resource like petroleum. If the engineer helps his company access the oil, that makes them all stronger. He has done his work. If the indigenous person taps into the special power that is attained by experiencing the solstice on the Bighorn Mountains, and then from which they feel greater connection to the source of all power, then the person has done her or his work. It is very physical, very pragmatic, and based on the power of the experiences. People are moved to live and die for these traditions, for these experiences. It's very pragmatic, very physical. We are not talking airy-fairy stuff. I can't tell you about the beliefs of the Crow. I can tell you about these physicality and the value of places that have provided them access to power. Now, for all the reasons that energy companies work hard to secure their access through title to resource extraction, indigenous people work hard to secure their access to the ritual connections they have experienced in their sacred lands. The difference between the two is that one is built on a short-term profit ethic, while the other is built on a long-term connection ethic. The petroleum engineer is not held responsible for maintaining the balance of the source of power, but rather has incentives to use it up before anyone else can get it, with no incentive to ensure that future generations will also have access to that power. That's not how we've been determining what's most important. We've pretty much been determining what's most important in terms of what we want now. When it comes to our energy policy. When Grant Bulltail's great-granduncle fought and died on Heart Mountain, he was doing so to preserve the Apsalaka, that's the Crow's name for themselves, the Apsalaka access to the mountain for future generations, right? His people needed to be able to be there, and they needed to move the Blackfeet off, and he was killed during that. So, receiving the gift of tears on the mountain is a renewable resource and does not deplete the access to the power for future generations. So it's a very different ethic at work there, but both are very pragmatic. Embodied relationship to the power of the earth, rather than something that happens for people in churches, temples, or mosques, does that help us engage with the power of religious lives? Does that help us solve this mission impossible? Even institutional religions start with the story of creation, how the earth is the first creation. The rest of the stories after that creation story are economic stories. What work do humans need to do in order to have a strong connection with the power that created the earth? That work includes prayers, fasting, meditation, pilgrimages, all the things that we have studied. If you take away any lesson from this class, I hope it is that religion is a working relationship to the powers of the created world. Religious people are not believers, but rather are workers. And the work they do is meant to strengthen their relationship to the power that undergirds life, from Brahman to emptiness, to Yahweh, to God, to Allah, to the ancestors. If you make this translation, you'll have a much better capacity to understand why religion is found at sites of territorial battles, from Northern Ireland to the Middle East, to the culture wars in America. Religious people work every day to increase their connections to the places in which they understand they have access to and will receive strength from the ultimate source of powers, from nirvana to the kingdom at hand. Go forth with Mission Impossible. It's been a pleasure to work with you. Bye-bye.